The morning mist clung to the grass airfield at Beaumont-sur-Oise, 40 kilometers north of Paris, as Oberleutnant Heinrich Krueger pulled his leather flying helmet over his head. September 15, 1943, would begin like any other escort mission for the seasoned Messerschmitt Bf 109 pilot, but it would end with revelations that would shake his understanding of American aviation capabilities to its very core. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Krueger had been flying combat missions for 18 months, accumulating 14 confirmed victories against Royal Air Force Spitfires and American bombers. At 26, he was considered one of the more experienced pilots in Jagdgeschwader 26, having survived the brutal air battles over Britain, the Eastern Front, and now the escalating daylight bombing campaign over occupied Europe. His confidence in German engineering and tactical superiority had been earned through countless encounters where Luftwaffe fighters had demonstrated clear advantages in speed, maneuverability, and firepower. But this morning would introduce him to an American fighter aircraft that defied every assumption German intelligence had made about American aviation technology and pilot training. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt was about to shatter German preconceptions about American industrial capabilities in ways that would reverberate throughout the Luftwaffe hierarchy. The intelligence briefing at dawn had been routine, delivered by Hauptmann Werner Steinberg, the squadron's intelligence officer who had served on the Eastern Front before being reassigned to gather information about Allied aircraft performance. Steinberg stood before a map of northern France, pointing to expected bomber formations and their probable targets. "Gentlemen, reconnaissance indicates another large formation of American heavy bombers approaching from the southwest. Expected strength is approximately 240 Boeing B-17 flying fortresses, targeting aircraft manufacturing facilities in the Ruhr Valley. Fighter escort will likely consist of the usual Lockheed P-38 Lightnings, which, as you know, have limited range and will turn back approximately here." Steinberg indicated a point on the map, roughly 150 kilometers inside occupied territory. Krueger listened with the casual attention of a pilot who had heard similar briefings dozens of times. The pattern was predictable and increasingly favorable to German defenders. American bombers flew in tight formations that provided mutual defensive fire but made them vulnerable to concentrated fighter attacks. Their escort fighters, primarily the twin-engine P-38 Lightning, possessed good performance characteristics but lacked the range to accompany bombers deep into German airspace. This tactical limitation created what German pilots called the happy hunting time, a period during each bombing mission when American heavy bombers flew without fighter protection, making them vulnerable to sustained attacks by Luftwaffe interceptors. Krueger had scored 6 of his 14 victories during these unescorted portions of American bombing missions. "What about these new American fighters we've been hearing rumors about?" asked Lieutenant Franz Müller, a 22-year-old pilot who had recently joined the squadron after completing advanced training. Müller had heard whispers from pilots returning from missions over Western Germany about unfamiliar American aircraft, but details remained vague and contradictory. Hauptmann Steinberg consulted his notes before responding. "Intelligence reports suggest the Americans are experimenting with a new single-engine fighter designated P-47. Initial assessments indicate it is significantly larger and heavier than current American fighters, which should make it less maneuverable than our Messerschmitt 109s. The aircraft appears to be designed primarily for ground attack missions rather than air-to-air combat, so it should not present significant challenges to experienced pilots." The assessment reflected German understanding of fighter aircraft design philosophy, which emphasized lightweight construction, high maneuverability, and rapid climb rates. German engineers had achieved remarkable success with this approach, producing fighters like the Bf 109 and Focke-Wulf 190 that could outmaneuver most Allied aircraft in dogfighting situations. But German intelligence had fundamentally misunderstood American design priorities and manufacturing capabilities. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt represented a completely different approach to fighter aircraft design, one that would challenge German tactical assumptions and demonstrate American industrial capacity in ways that German planners had not anticipated. Krueger climbed into the cockpit of his Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6, an aircraft he knew intimately after hundreds of hours of combat flying. The fighter weighed approximately 3,400 kilograms fully loaded and was powered by a Daimler-Benz DB605 engine producing 1,475 horsepower. Its armament consisted of one 30mm Mk108 cannon firing through the propeller hub and two 13mm MG131 machine guns mounted above the engine. The Bf-109 had been designed for rapid acceleration, high rate of climb, and exceptional maneuverability at combat altitudes. German tactics emphasized these advantages, using superior climb performance to gain altitude advantage before attacking Allied formations from above. The fighter's relatively light weight and responsive controls allowed experienced pilots to outmaneuver heavier Allied aircraft in turning combat. As Krueger ran through his pre-flight checklist, he felt the familiar confidence that came from flying an aircraft he understood completely. Every control response, every engine sound, every flight characteristic had been memorized through extensive training and combat experience. The Bf-109 was an extension of his will, responding to his inputs with precision and predictability. The squadron took off in formation, 12 Messerschmitt fighters climbing steadily toward their assigned patrol altitude of 7,000 meters. The morning air was clear and calm, providing excellent visibility for intercepting incoming bomber formations. Krueger settled into the routine of formation flying, monitoring his engine instruments while scanning the sky for signs of approaching aircraft. At 08:47 hours, the first radar contact appeared on German early warning systems. A large formation of aircraft was approaching from the southwest, flying at approximately 6,500 meters altitude and maintaining steady course toward targets in the Ruhr industrial region. The size and composition of the formation matched intelligence predictions for a major daylight bombing raid. Krueger's squadron was vectored toward an intercept course that would bring them into contact with the bomber formation approximately 30 kilometers southwest of their current position. As they climbed to attack altitude, Krueger could see the distinctive contrails of American heavy bombers beginning to appear on the horizon, long white streaks against the blue September sky. The sight of American bomber formations always impressed German pilots, despite their adversarial relationship. The Americans flew in precisely maintained formations that demonstrated excellent pilot training and discipline. Each bomber maintained its assigned position within the formation with mechanical precision, creating overlapping fields of defensive fire that made attack approaches difficult and dangerous. But today's formation appeared different from previous missions. As Krueger's squadron approached the bomber stream, he noticed additional aircraft flying above and to the sides of the main formation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means these were not the familiar twin-engine P-38 Lightnings that usually provided escort for the first portion of bombing missions. Unknown fighters at 2 o'clock high, reported Feldwebel Otto Richter, an experienced pilot flying as Krueger's wingman. Configuration appears to be single-engine, but they're larger than anything we've encountered before. Krueger adjusted his course to get a better look at the unfamiliar aircraft. What he saw challenged his understanding of American fighter design philosophy. The aircraft were indeed single-engine fighters, but they were enormous compared to anything he had previously encountered. They appeared to be at least 50% larger than German or British fighters, with massive radial engines and unusually robust construction. "Those must be the new P-47s intelligence briefed us about," Krueger transmitted to his squadron. "Remember, they're supposed to be optimized for ground attack, so they should be easy targets in air-to-air combat." The assessment reflected standard German tactical thinking about American aircraft design. Heavy fighters were assumed to be sluggish and unmaneuverable, suitable only for attacking ground targets or providing defensive fire support. German pilots had achieved consistent success against heavier Allied aircraft by using superior maneuverability to force turning combat situations that favored lighter, more agile German fighters. But as Krueger's squadron maneuvered to attack the bomber formation, the American escort fighters began to respond in ways that contradicted German expectations. Instead of maintaining defensive positions around the bombers, the P-47s began to climb rapidly, gaining altitude advantage over the approaching German fighters. The rate of climb demonstrated by the American fighters was remarkable. Despite their apparent size and weight, the P-47s were ascending at speeds that matched or exceeded the performance of German fighters. Krueger watched in amazement as the American aircraft continued climbing well above his squadron's altitude, reaching heights that should have been impossible for such large and heavy fighters. "They're climbing faster than we are," reported Lieutenant Müller, who was struggling to maintain altitude advantage over the rapidly ascending American fighters. "How is that possible with such heavy aircraft?" The question reflected a fundamental misunderstanding of American engineering priorities. While German fighters emphasized lightweight and maneuverability, American designers had prioritized engine power and structural strength. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double WASP engine powering the P-47 produced 2,000 horsepower, significantly more than the engines used in German fighters. This power advantage, combined with turbocharging technology that maintained engine performance at high altitudes, gave the P-47 climb rates and high-altitude performance that exceeded German fighters despite its greater weight. American engineers had achieved superior performance through different design approaches rather than by copying German methods. As the American fighters gained altitude advantage, Krueger realized that his squadron was being maneuvered into a disadvantageous tactical position. The P-47s had climbed above the German formation and were beginning to position themselves for diving attacks, reversing the usual tactical relationship between German and American fighters. German tactics relied heavily on altitude advantage to initiate combat on favorable terms. German fighters would typically climb above Allied formations before diving to attack, using gravity and engine power to achieve high closing speeds while maintaining the option to break off combat by continuing their dive if the situation became unfavorable. But now the American fighters held the altitude advantage, and they appeared to be preparing to use exactly the same tactics that German pilots had employed successfully against previous American escort fighters. The role reversal was both tactically concerning and psychologically unsettling for pilots who had grown accustomed to dictating the terms of air combat engagement. "Achtung! American fighters diving from above!" Krueger shouted into his radio as the first P-47s began their attack run. What happened next would fundamentally challenge everything German pilots thought they knew about American fighter capabilities. The P-47 Thunderbolts dove toward the German formation at speeds that seemed impossible for aircraft of their size and configuration. Krueger had expected the heavy American fighters to dive sluggishly, giving German pilots time to maneuver away from attack runs or to turn the engagement into the kind of turning combat that favored more maneuverable German aircraft. Instead, the American fighters dove with tremendous speed and momentum, reaching velocities that exceeded anything Krueger had previously witnessed in air combat. The sound of their approach was unlike anything he had heard before, a deep, roaring noise that grew rapidly in intensity as they closed the distance to his formation. The first P-47 that attacked Krueger's aircraft passed him so quickly that he barely had time to register its presence before it was gone, climbing away at high speed with energy remaining for continued maneuvering. The American pilot had fired a burst from extremely long range, sending tracer rounds past Krueger's aircraft before breaking off the attack and beginning another climb for a second attack run. But it was the firepower of the American fighter that truly shocked the German pilot. The P-47 was armed with 8.50 caliber machine guns, twice the number of guns carried by most German fighters. The weight of fire from these weapons was devastating, creating a stream of projectiles that filled the air around Krueger's aircraft with deadly metal. German fighters typically carried 2 or 3 weapons with different ballistic characteristics, requiring pilots to close to relatively short ranges to ensure accuracy. The P-47's 8 machine guns, all firing the same ammunition type, created a dense pattern of fire that remained effective at much longer ranges than German pilots were accustomed to facing. "Mein Gott!" exclaimed Feldwebel Richter as another P-47 dove past his aircraft, missing him by what seemed like mere meters while firing continuously. They're firing from 800 meters range and still hitting targets. The engagement was developing in ways that violated all German tactical expectations. The American fighters were not behaving like the heavy, sluggish ground attack aircraft that German intelligence had described. Instead, they were demonstrating speed, firepower, and tactical aggressiveness that exceeded the performance of any American fighter German pilots had previously encountered. More disturbing was the apparent endurance of the American escort fighters. Previous American escorts had been forced to turn back due to fuel limitations after relatively short periods over occupied territory. But these P-47s showed no signs of fuel constraints, continuing to engage German fighters well beyond the point where previous American escorts would have been forced to return to base. The tactical implications were profound. If American fighters could maintain escort coverage throughout entire bombing missions, the happy hunting time that German pilots had exploited against unescorted bombers would disappear. German fighter tactics would need fundamental revision to address escort fighters that could match or exceed German performance in speed, firepower, and operational range. But the psychological impact on German pilots was perhaps even more significant than the tactical challenges. These men had been trained to believe in German technological superiority and pilot excellence. Their confidence in combat was based on the assumption that German aircraft and German training provided decisive advantages over American equipment and American pilots. The P-47 challenged these assumptions in the most direct way possible, through superior performance in actual combat conditions. German pilots were being outfought by American aircraft and American pilots using tactics that German pilots had considered uniquely German strengths. As the engagement continued, more disturbing revelations emerged about American fighter capabilities. The P-47s demonstrated not only superior speed in diving attacks, but also remarkable durability when subjected to German defensive fire. Krueger watched several American fighters absorb hits from German weapons and continue fighting effectively, showing damage tolerance that far exceeded anything he had previously observed. German fighters were relatively fragile, designed for light weight and high performance rather than structural durability. A few hits from enemy weapons could disable critical systems or cause structural damage that forced German pilots to break off combat and return to base for repairs. The P-47s appeared to be constructed according to completely different design principles. Their large size and heavy construction provided protection for critical systems and redundancy for essential components. American fighters could absorb damage that would have destroyed German aircraft while continuing to fly and fight effectively. "I've hit that American 3 times and he's still attacking," reported Lieutenant Wöhler, frustration evident in his voice. What are these aircraft made of? The answer reflected American manufacturing capabilities and design philosophy that German engineers had not fully understood. American aircraft factories were producing fighters with structural strength and component redundancy that would have been considered wasteful by German standards, where material conservation was essential due to resource limitations. But American industry could afford to build aircraft with robust construction because American production capacity was sufficient to provide both strength and quantity. The same industrial capabilities that impressed German prisoners of war in American camps were being applied to aircraft production, creating fighters that combined performance with durability in ways that German aircraft could not match. As Krueger's squadron struggled to engage the American escort fighters effectively, the bomber formation continued toward its target without significant interference. The P-47s had successfully prevented German fighters from mounting sustained attacks against the bombers, fulfilling their primary mission while demonstrating capabilities that exceeded German expectations. For Krueger, the engagement was a revelation that would influence his understanding of American aviation technology and industrial capacity for the remainder of the war. The P-47 represented more than just another fighter aircraft. It demonstrated American ability to design and manufacture military equipment that surpassed German capabilities through different approaches rather than by copying German methods. The implications extended far beyond individual air combat engagements. If American industry could produce fighters like the P-47 in substantial quantities, the tactical balance of air warfare over Europe would shift decisively in favor of Allied forces. German fighter pilots would face opponents with superior performance characteristics, forcing fundamental changes in Luftwaffe tactics and strategy. More fundamentally, the P-47 represented American industrial capacity operating at a scale and with a technological sophistication that German planners had underestimated. The aircraft was not just a weapon system, but a demonstration of American engineering capabilities, manufacturing capacity, and resource abundance that would prove decisive in determining the outcome of the air war over Europe. The autumn of 1943 brought a systematic revelation that would fundamentally alter German understanding of American aviation capabilities. Krueger found himself assigned to increasingly desperate missions as P-47 Thunderbolts appeared in growing numbers over the skies of occupied Europe. Each encounter provided new evidence of American industrial capacity operating on a scale that German planners had failed to comprehend. Major Wilhelm Hartmann, the Geschwader commander, called an emergency briefing at Beaumont-sur-Oise after 3 consecutive missions resulted in heavy German losses and minimal damage to American bomber formations. The assembled pilots represented some of the most experienced fighter crews in the Luftwaffe, men who had survived campaigns in Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. Their collective expertise made their reports about American fighter performance all the more disturbing to higher command. "Gentlemen, we are facing a new reality," Hartmann announced, standing before a wall chart showing recent combat losses. "In the past month, we have lost 37 aircraft while shooting down only 14 American fighters. These numbers represent a fundamental shift in the balance of air combat over Europe." The statistics contradicted everything German pilots had been taught about air warfare. German fighter tactics had been developed based on the assumption that superior pilot training, aircraft performance, and tactical doctrine would provide decisive advantages over Allied air forces. The emergence of the P-47 as an effective escort fighter had reversed these calculations in ways that demanded immediate tactical revision. Krueger raised his hand to speak. "Herr Major, the American fighters are demonstrating capabilities that our intelligence assessments did not predict. Their speed in diving attacks exceeds anything we have encountered. Yesterday, I clocked a P-47 at over 800 kilometers per hour in a vertical dive, and the pilot maintained control throughout the entire maneuver. The speed Krueger reported seemed impossible for a fighter aircraft weighing over 4,500 kilograms. German fighters achieved their best performance through light construction and careful attention to aerodynamic efficiency. A few hits from enemy weapons could disable critical systems or cause structural damage that forced German pilots to break off combat and return to base for repairs. The P-47s appeared to be constructed according to completely different design principles. Their large size and heavy construction provided protection for critical systems and redundancy for essential components. American fighters could absorb damage that would have destroyed German aircraft while continuing to fly and fight effectively. "I've hit that American 3 times and he's still attacking," reported Lieutenant Müller, frustration evident in his voice. "What are these aircraft made of?" The answer reflected American manufacturing capabilities and design philosophy that German engineers had not fully understood. American aircraft factories were producing fighters with structural strength and component redundancy that would have been considered wasteful by German standards, where material conservation was essential due to resource limitations. But American industry could afford to build aircraft with robust construction because American production capacity was sufficient to provide both strength and quantity. The same industrial capabilities that impressed German prisoners of war in American camps were being applied to aircraft production, creating fighters that combined performance with durability in ways that German aircraft could not match. As Krueger's squadron struggled to engage the American escort fighters effectively, the bomber formation continued toward its target without significant interference. The P-47s had successfully prevented German fighters from mounting sustained attacks against the bombers, fulfilling their primary mission while demonstrating capabilities that exceeded German expectations. For Krueger, the engagement was a revelation that would influence his understanding of American aviation technology and industrial capacity for the remainder of the war. The P-47 Thunderbolt represented more than just another fighter aircraft. It demonstrated American ability to design and manufacture military equipment that surpassed German capabilities through different approaches rather than by copying German methods. The implications extended far beyond individual air combat engagements. If American industry could produce fighters like the P-47 in substantial quantities, the tactical balance of air warfare over Europe would shift decisively in favor of Allied forces. German fighter pilots would face opponents with superior performance characteristics, forcing fundamental changes in Luftwaffe tactics and strategy. More fundamentally, the P-47 represented American industrial capacity operating at a scale and with the idea that a massive American fighter could exceed German performance through brute force engineering challenged fundamental assumptions about aircraft design. But Krueger's observations were being confirmed by pilots throughout the Luftwaffe. P-47 Thunderbolts were routinely demonstrating dive speeds that exceeded 500 miles per hour while maintaining structural integrity and pilot control. The aircraft's robust construction allowed it to withstand forces that would have destroyed lighter German fighters. Oberleutnant Erich Zimmermann, a veteran pilot with 19 victories, provided additional details about P-47 performance characteristics that defied German expectations. The Americans are using diving attacks to build tremendous speed, then converting that speed into climb performance that allows them to regain altitude advantage quickly. They're essentially using gravity as a weapon system. Zimmermann's tactical analysis revealed American pilots employing energy management techniques that maximize their aircraft's strengths while minimizing exposure to German counterattacks. Instead of engaging in traditional turning combat where lighter German fighters held advantages, P-47 pilots used hit-and-run tactics that exploited their superior speed and firepower. The American approach represented a fundamental shift in fighter combat philosophy. Where German tactics emphasized maneuverability and pilot skill in close combat, American tactics relied on technological superiority and systematic application of overwhelming force. P-47 pilots could afford to attack from long range because their aircraft carried sufficient ammunition for extended engagements. "How much ammunition do these aircraft carry?" asked Lieutenant Stefan Weber, a newer pilot who had joined the squadron after completing abbreviated training designed to replace heavy combat losses. Major Hartmann consulted intelligence reports before answering. Each P-47 carries approximately 3,400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition. For comparison, our Bf-109s carry 60 rounds for the 30mm cannon and 300 rounds for each 13mm machine gun. The Americans can fire continuously for over 3 minutes, while we have ammunition for perhaps 30 seconds of sustained fire. The ammunition capacity reflected American industrial capabilities that German planners had consistently underestimated. While German factories struggled to produce adequate supplies of specialized ammunition for different weapon systems, American factories were manufacturing standardized .50 caliber ammunition in quantities that allowed generous allocation to fighter aircraft. More significantly, the standardization of American weapons simplified logistics and maintenance while providing consistent ballistic performance across all 8 guns mounted in each P-47. German fighters carried multiple weapon types with different ammunition requirements, creating supply complications that often left aircraft partially armed due to shortages of specific ammunition types. The briefing continued with reports from other squadrons that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of American air power expansion. P-47 units were appearing over targets throughout occupied Europe with increasing frequency and in growing numbers. Intelligence estimates suggested American factories were producing over 1,000 P-47 aircraft per month, a production rate that exceeded total German fighter production across all aircraft types. Where are they getting the pilots for all these aircraft? Wondered Hauptmann Kurt Fischer, an experienced flight leader who had served since the beginning of the war. We know American pilot training programs, but this expansion rate seems impossible to sustain. The question revealed another fundamental misunderstanding of American capabilities. German pilot training had been reduced to minimal levels due to fuel shortages and instructor losses. New German pilots received barely 100 hours of flying time before being assigned to combat units, while experienced pilots flew increasingly demanding missions that resulted in high casualty rates among the most skilled personnel. American pilot training programs operated according to completely different principles. The United States was training over 100,000 pilots annually using abundant fuel supplies and systematic instruction methods that produced competent aviators in large numbers. American training emphasized standardized procedures and equipment familiarity rather than individual brilliance, creating pilots who could effectively operate complex aircraft systems while working as coordinated team members. The systematic nature of American pilot production was visible in combat performance. P-47 pilots demonstrated consistent tactical discipline and coordination that reflected thorough training and standardized procedures. Unlike German pilots who often fought as individual artists, American pilots operated as components of larger tactical systems designed to maximize collective effectiveness. Krueger had observed this coordination during recent combat encounters. American fighter formations maintained communication and mutual support throughout extended engagements, with individual pilots following coordinated tactical plans rather than improvising based on immediate circumstances. When one P-47 was threatened, other aircraft in the formation immediately provided support through coordinated maneuvers that suggested extensive practice and training. The tactical discipline demonstrated by American pilots was particularly evident in their bomber escort procedures. P-47 formations assigned specific aircraft to different roles within the escort mission, with some fighters maintaining close formation with bombers while others operated as free-ranging interceptors against German attackers. This division of responsibilities maximized protective coverage while ensuring adequate response to German tactical initiatives. German fighter pilots found themselves facing opponents who combined superior aircraft performance with systematic tactical procedures that minimized individual German advantages. Even experienced German pilots struggled against American formations that operated according to well-rehearsed plans designed to counter German tactical strengths. The intelligence briefing revealed additional disturbing trends in American aircraft deployment. P-47 units were being equipped with external fuel tanks that extended their operational range deep into German airspace. These drop tanks allowed American escort fighters to accompany bomber formations throughout entire missions, eliminating the unescorted periods that German pilots had exploited successfully. The implications are clear, Major Hartmann concluded. We can no longer expect periods of vulnerability in American bomber missions. Their escort fighters have the range to provide continuous protection, and their performance characteristics exceed our ability to counter them effectively with current tactics. The strategic implications extended far beyond individual combat engagements. If American bombers could strike targets throughout occupied Europe with effective fighter escort, German industrial production would face systematic destruction that could cripple the war effort. The P-47 represented more than just another fighter aircraft. It was a key component of American strategic bombing campaigns designed to destroy German industrial capacity. German attempts to counter P-47 effectiveness revealed additional limitations in German industrial capabilities. The Luftwaffe had experimented with heavier armament installations designed to destroy American fighters with single hits, but these modifications reduced aircraft performance and created maintenance complications that German ground crews struggled to address with limited resources. American aircraft, by contrast, demonstrated remarkable maintainability under field conditions. P-47s could operate from rough airfields with minimal ground support equipment while maintaining high operational readiness rates. German pilots reported encountering the same American aircraft repeatedly over extended periods, suggesting American maintenance capabilities that kept complex fighters operational despite intensive combat usage. The reliability of American aircraft reflected manufacturing quality control that ensured consistent performance across large production runs. While German fighters often suffered from component failures and manufacturing defects that reduced operational effectiveness, American aircraft demonstrated consistent reliability that allowed sustained operations under demanding conditions. Krueger experienced this reliability difference firsthand during a mission in late October, when his Messerschmitt suffered engine problems that forced him to break off combat and return to base with reduced power. As he limped home, he watched P-47s continue their mission with apparent confidence in their aircraft's mechanical reliability, a confidence that German pilots could no longer take for granted. The psychological impact of facing superior enemy equipment was becoming evident throughout German fighter units. Pilot morale suffered as German aircrews realized they were flying inferior aircraft against opponents with decisive technological advantages. The sense of German technical superiority that had sustained Luftwaffe effectiveness during early war victories was being systematically destroyed by encounter after encounter with American aircraft that exceeded German performance. Training new pilots to face P-47s presented challenges that German instructors struggled to address. Traditional German fighter tactics emphasized individual initiative and aircraft performance advantages that no longer existed against American opposition. Young pilots trained according to outdated tactical principles found themselves overwhelmed when they encountered American fighters that could outperform German aircraft in most flight regimes. The disparity in pilot survival rates reflected these technological and tactical disadvantages. Experienced German pilots like Krueger could sometimes hold their own against P-47s through superior combat experience and tactical knowledge, but newer pilots faced overwhelming disadvantages that resulted in high casualty rates and short combat careers. American pilots, meanwhile, benefited from aircraft that provided significant performance margins for error while offering superior protection against German defensive fire. P-47 pilots could survive mistakes that would have been fatal in German aircraft, allowing them to gain combat experience and improve their skills through successive missions. The industrial implications of P-47 production became evident as German intelligence gathered information about American manufacturing capabilities. Republic Aviation was producing P-47s using mass production techniques that achieved unprecedented production rates while maintaining consistent quality standards. The Farmingdale factory employed over 25,000 workers, operating around the clock to deliver completed aircraft at rates that exceeded German production capabilities across all fighter types combined. More disturbing were reports of additional P-47 production lines being established at other American factories. The aircraft's design had been simplified for mass production using standardized components and assembly line techniques that allowed rapid expansion of manufacturing capacity. American industry was treating fighter aircraft production as an engineering and logistics challenge rather than a craftwork specialty. German fighter production, by contrast, relied on skilled craftsmen building aircraft using techniques that emphasized individual attention to detail rather than systematic mass production. While this approach had produced excellent aircraft during peacetime, it could not compete with American production methods during wartime when quantity was as important as quality. The technological sophistication of P-47 systems also revealed American capabilities in electronics and precision manufacturing that exceeded German achievements. American aircraft carried radio equipment, navigation aids, and weapons systems that demonstrated advanced electronic manufacturing capabilities. German pilots reported that American fighters possessed radio communication clarity and reliability that exceeded German equipment performance. Perhaps most significantly, P-47 pilots demonstrated tactical coordination that suggested sophisticated training in radio communication procedures and formation flying techniques. American fighter formations maintained constant communication throughout extended combat engagements, sharing tactical information and coordinating maneuvers with precision that reflected systematic training and reliable equipment. By November 1943, German fighter units were being forced to develop entirely new tactical approaches designed to minimize contact with P-47 escorts while attempting to attack bomber formations. These defensive tactics represented a fundamental reversal of German air combat philosophy, transforming aggressive fighter pilots into cautious defenders struggling to survive against superior opposition. The transformation was visible in mission planning and execution throughout German fighter commands. Instead of seeking combat with American escorts, German pilots were instructed to avoid P-47 formations whenever possible while attacking bombers during brief moments of vulnerability. The psychological impact of this defensive posture affected pilots' confidence and aggressive spirit that had previously characterized German fighter operations. Krueger found himself adapting to combat conditions that violated everything he had learned about air warfare during his training and early combat experience. Instead of seeking advantageous combat situations, he was forced to accept unfavorable tactical positions while hoping to survive long enough to inflict minimal damage on American bomber formations. The systematic nature of American air operations was becoming evident through intelligence reports and prisoner interrogations. P-47 units operated according to standardized procedures that maximized their technological advantages while minimizing exposure to German tactical strengths. American commanders had analyzed German fighter tactics and developed countermeasures that negated traditional German advantages in maneuverability and pilot skill. The strategic bombing campaign that P-47s enabled was already having measurable effects on German industrial production and civilian morale. American bombers, protected by effective fighter escorts, were systematically destroying German aircraft factories, fuel production facilities, and transportation networks. The P-47 was proving to be a decisive weapon system that enabled American strategic objectives while demonstrating industrial capabilities that German planners had failed to anticipate. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.